let's say someone's been growing up and was bullied growing up at school, and is still basically bullying and feeling like an outcast in society, and therefore they are feeling very very aware of their sort of limitations from their perspective and from other people's perspective, and they tend to judge themselves. How do we begin? What are the first steps someone must take to start accepting ourselves and start seeing all those things that other people see as our flaws, as opportunities, as our authenticity, as who we really are, as our superpowers in a way?
So for me, I had this crazy breakthrough experience where it came to accepting responsibility. I think that's the first step, but how do we get there, right? We're like, okay, but that's a lot to take on. And for so many of us, we push it away and we compartmentalize it and we hide from it. And I think when we talk about self-love and embracing that darkness, the first step is to accept that's a part of it, that there has been pain from the past. But when we look at it from a new perspective, we realize that there were lessons in all of these experiences, that the reason why you were bullied or the reason why you went through these traumas were to help you to grow. And without them, you would have stayed in your comfort zone. You would have stayed in the same place. So the first step is to take responsibility and then to forgive yourself, to know that it's okay, to know that the way that life delivered the learning lesson for you is its own unique way, that we can't judge the way that the lesson showed up for us. And for me, I had this breakthrough experience where I was doing a forgiveness meditation, and my 19-year-old self was sitting in front of me in the listening chair. And she was 200 pounds, black, short hair, piercings all over her face. And I asked her, why were you so angry? I was going through all of this forgiveness work. And the last question I asked her changed my life. And I said, why were you so angry? And she said, because I had so much love to give and no one to give it to. And what I realized is I was trying to give it to every boy who would come into my reality, and I wasn't giving that love to myself. And I got married and still didn't find that fulfillment. So it's called self-love because only you can do it. And it starts with accepting that and forgiving yourself for maybe some of the trauma that you've allowed or you've caused or contributed. We have to just begin to forgive ourselves, and that's what takes work. The bubble baths are easy.
One of the best self-love quotes I've heard was, self-love is a realization that you're made out of love. And that's what you're saying right now, basically, in the sense that when you start loving yourself rather than spreading all the love outside without first giving to yourself, then you're ridding yourself of the love that you already are. You're not acknowledging the fact that you are love, and because you are love, you're supposed to give love. So you're trying to jump a step ahead in a way.
Yeah, and I want to point out the fact that was conditional love. And I don't even like the word unconditional love because love is unconditional. You don't need that word in front of it. So everything I was trying to give out was conditional. If I give this to you, you'll have to love me back. And I was hoping that you'll love me back would fulfill me. And half the time I didn't get step one, the next step of them loving me back. They normally would just take and walk away. Yeah. Yeah. And then when they would give it back, I still didn't feel enough. And it was because I didn't love myself. I didn't spend time with myself, going back to some of the traumas that I had buried from my childhood that I didn't want to deal with. And it's, I say the new strength is vulnerability. And that's to go back to the darkness and look and consciously look and say, okay, this past pain is over. So it cannot possibly be worse than what it was in the past. So maybe if I just use the light of my awareness to shine on it a little, maybe it won't be so intimidating. Maybe it won't be such a strong belief that if you were sexually abused or if you were made fun of or whatever, we carry these beliefs because maybe at some point in our life we accepted them to be true. And we have to challenge what we believe to be true. I find it funny that the word lie is in the middle of the word belief.
Oh yeah, I've never thought about that way.
Right?
So Brittany, sometimes when I talk to people about self-love and I'm like, oh, you have to love yourself, like, well, that's kind of narcissistic. So what would you say is the difference between self-love and narcissism?
I feel like narcissism requires another party. And self-love is only involved with you, because a narcissist feeds off of someone else's energy. And when you're loving yourself, you're only concerned with you. And I feel like when it's come, and this isn't, we're not talking about like ego here. So I feel like narcissists could be really thrown into the category with ego, which isn't a bad thing. Ego is a great thing, right? It's here to protect us. It's here to like, hey, wake up. We've got to protect. It's like a protective layer. Like all fruit has a protective layer. Okay. And our ego is like our protective shell. And it's just there to help us, and not to make anyone feel less than, but I feel like we've gotten a little out of balance with that.
Yes, absolutely. And it comes down to the conditional love that you just mentioned. Like when there is conditional love, that's when we can go into the narcissistic phase of fearing that we're not lovable, and therefore trying to prove it to other people, and therefore creating conditional love. Now, you talked a little bit about the not forgiving ourselves and not accepting ourselves. So are these sort of barriers that we have to self-love? Because if we assume that we're born into love, and therefore we love ourselves when we're children, and then somehow there are certain barriers that come into our lives, whether that's bullying or a perception that we have around ourselves, that pinches us off in a way from that love that naturally flows through us. So what would you say are the most dominant barriers to love, to self-love, that most people face?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, our inner critic, our inner voice, the way that we speak to ourselves, the story that we tell ourselves on the inside. My story for so many years was, I'm fat, I'm fat, I'm fat. And I got exactly that. I got exactly what I asked for. Talk about law of attraction, right? It's the story that I was telling myself then began to project onto everybody and everything else. When you tell yourself a story, is particularly a negative one, you begin to notice and focus on that within other people. And when you begin to love yourself, you no longer self-criticize and self-judge. So you no longer focus on that within other people, and you begin to see their beauty and their love and their joy and their light and spirit and passion. And it's what you focus on is the type of reality you're going to experience. And when I focused on hating myself and beating up my body, I focused on that about other people, and I wasn't able to allow them to show off their unique sparkle and their shine. So I think it's really important that we realize when we criticize ourselves, we only we criticize other people, and that cuts us off from that natural born love that we are.
So it's all a reflection, basically. When whatever we do to ourselves, we automatically do to other people. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say someone has just realized that, oh my God, I don't love myself enough, or I could love myself more. So the first step would be learning to accept yourself and forgiving yourself. I like the idea of a self-love practice, something that we do on a daily basis consistently to consciously boost our self-love and our love towards ourselves. So what are your guidelines to creating a self-love practice? What is a self-love practice from your perspective?
Oh my gosh, such a great question. And honestly, that's exactly what my online course Shine School is all about. Is like the entire step-by-step process of carving out like a self-care practice. And it starts with scheduling time, because we all have the 24 hours. We all have the same 24 hours. So you have to start scheduling time and blocking it out. I know that seems simple and it seems silly, but it's so important, because if you're not spending the time doing the work, then nothing's happening. So one of my first lessons is to schedule time for your self-care. And then once you've done that, I think the next step is to ask yourself, what do I need most right now? So many people think that they've got to follow some crazy protocol. And whenever I put out like a self-care ritual list of things to do, people feel obligated to do either the whole list or, you know, the things that they don't like on the list. And so I like to just leave it simple. What lights you up, and what do you need in this moment right now? I think that's the most important question, because we may need to work out, sure, Of course we do. But what we might need more than going to the gym is to take time to go inward and reflect, because there's a lot of mental crazy energy going on. So I think you just have to, again, going back to taking responsibility, take responsibility and say, what do I need right now? And then use that time that you've carved out to commit to whatever that may be. And it's simple stuff. This isn't like rocket science, you know. It may just be a good old-fashioned orgasm, like no big deal.
Why not? I love that you're making this so in the moment, because sometimes we limit ourselves and we make our spiritual practice or a self-love practice to feel like work when it should really feel like fun. Many people just limit themselves, especially in the spiritual community, when it comes to spirituality and self-love practice, feeling that, oh, I have to do these kind of spiritual stuff. Whereas, as you just said, an orgasm will do.
Yes, it will.
It could be anything that helps us feel this sense of self-love. Let's say, let me take this a step further. Someone has nurtured self-love. Let's say someone has been on the spiritual path for a while. They've done the inner work. They've forgiven themselves. They've forgiven their bullies. They've accepted themselves. They love themselves. Is there a limit to self-love? And how can we push even more? How can we keep loving ourselves more and more and more and more if we want to reach the next level? And why would we want to reach the next level?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And to me, I feel like you can never stop exploring self-love, because every day there's a new opportunity to learn something new, whether it be about yourself or about other people or about the world, that influences the way that you think or feel or respond. So to me, I don't feel like there is an end. I do feel that we should be careful of trying to reach for and strive for and have a desire for it. Because all desires are futile, you know, they come and they go. So I think when we can get, for me, like what feels best for me at my journey right now is like just like being balanced. Like, you know, some days I don't do so good and some days I do great. And it's just kind of like, okay, the awareness, like, okay, maybe I could have, you know, been kinder to myself or kinder to other people. What can I do tomorrow to be better? And I think it's really not about just continuing to get bigger and better, but really like how easy is it for you to come back to your center of balance? Because I feel like when things are in balance, whew, that's where the peace is.
You touch on a very important point, which is the judgment that we feel when we fall off our practice, which brings me to my next question. What do we do when we relapse from our self-love practice? Let's say, for example, we've been doing really well, we've been kind to ourselves, nurturing self-love, and then we get caught up in a situation that causes us to just go back to our old limiting patterns of self-loathing and self-judgment. How do we come back to our practice?
Great question. And women experience this every month. And the thing is, you just accept it. Just as a wave comes and goes, ups and downs. Some days you're crazy, some days you're like on point and you're on fire. Life is an ever-changing tidal wave of emotion and experience. So I think if you find yourself like you're doing great and then you fall off, it'll be really noticeable when you fall off if you've been doing great for a long time. So it's easy for you to go, oh, wow, I ate a whole bag of chips sitting on the couch last night at 10 o'clock. I probably shouldn't have done that. Tomorrow, I'm gonna do better. Tomorrow, I'm gonna go to the gym, eat a salad, and not buy a bag of chips. You know what I mean? So I think you become more aware as you practice self-love, and you know immediately when you're self-sabotaging. So many people that are unconscious to it, that are in that cycle of just negative self-doubt, they aren't conscious that they're doing it. It's just a natural way of life to them. But as you begin to awaken, you begin to have more awareness, and you notice when you're treating yourself or other people negatively. Go have an orgasm, take a nap, and start again, you know, start again.
I love, so it's basically for learning to forgive ourselves rather than just go into self-resentment and just feeling guilty about it. Speaking of forgiveness, you've touched on it, but I want to go a little bit deeper. How do we forgive our bullies? Because yes, we bully ourselves, and for the most part, it is us we need to forgive and learn how to forgive. But what is forgiveness from your perspective? I feel that's a very important point, because we all use forgiveness just so lightly. Oh yeah, forgive your bullies, forgive this, forgive that. But if someone really hurts you, how do you let go of that and learn to make peace with it?
Yeah, great question. And I think when I'm coaching my clients, I find that most forgiveness work is around the self. That really is the biggest issue that people come up against. But when you're trying to forgive bullies and trying to forgive other people, I think one, having the awareness that they are human too, that they are suffering, that they go through problems and traumas of their own, and that's their coping mechanism and how they respond and react to situations. So we can't take things so personal. So we have to kind of like allow, like, okay, we think back to our high school bullies. It's so much easier now in hindsight, right? We're like, who cares about those people? They don't even know my middle name. That's like my rule. If you don't know my middle name, your opinion doesn't count. So I think that you just have to, one, like, we're adults now, and I think we can recognize that they were doing the best that they could. I feel this way about parents too. We recognize that they did the best that they could with all that they had at that time, and we have to know that we were shitty too. We probably said negative things to people, just as we were bullied as well. I mean, it was like our response and our defense, right? So I think we just have to recognize that that's all we knew as kids, and we have to just kind of start again and recreate society in a way that teaches children to build themselves up, to build up each other, instead of bashing each other. And I think we're at a turning point right now with us having this enlightened conversation about making changes and making those shifts. So when we recognize that we did it to ourselves, we have to recognize that those people are probably doing it to themselves as well. And and they have to go home with that, you know, and that's sad. So we can learn to love them.
I love the distinction of we're adults now, so we can understand better, we can know better. It brings me back to a memory. A few years ago, I was in London and I was invited to speak at an LGBT youth center to talk about bullying and how to let go and find healing. And I said something to them that really triggered them. I said that all bullying is really self-bullying, because when you bully yourself, that's what's in your energy, and therefore you attract other people proving that to you. And they couldn't hear it. And I didn't expect that, because usually when I share this with adults, they get it. But teenagers, in retrospect, I realized I shouldn't have expected them to get it right then and there, because they were kids going through bullying. So the energy that they were in was this fight or flight situation. They couldn't hear that, which it's a great contrast to who we are right now. We're far distant from that situation. We can think logically about it, and we can realize, yes, I was probably bullying myself, so I attracted those people. They did the best they could from their perspective. Let's just let it all go and move on. So thank you for bringing that up. Now, Brit, I'm curious about your self-love practice, because I always like to ask people this question, because we assume like that we know what a self-love practice would involve, but most people, like when I ask my clients, like, well, you have to do your self-love practice, like, what do you mean by that? So I always like to give people examples. So what is your self-love practice, and how has that evolved through the years?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And honestly, I could tell you so many things, and you know, orgasm's at the top of the list by now. But I feel like the most important thing I can tell you about my self-care practice is that it's evolved into a lifestyle, that it's not just 15 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes after work, that every single moment of my life, I am consciously choosing to participate in. So I feel like the best thing I could share is this simple principle that I live my life by. It's called the 7 or above rule. And I scale everything on a 1 to 10, 1 being awful and 10 being amazing. And if it's not a 7 or above, then I say no. And it has
I love it.
It has been a simple yet very true and powerful tool that I have used for everything in my life. And so when I talked about self-care practice earlier, I just said to ask yourself, what do I need right now? And so I apply my 7 or above principle to each moment. And I ask, you know, when you asked, do you want to be on the Lit Up Lightworker podcast? I was like, 1,000. Yes, like absolutely. There was no doubt. And having like a logical, because some people aren't used to trusting their intuition, or they don't know how to access or find it in their their body, or what their intuition sounds like versus what their ego or their fear sounds like. So if you're not evolved in that practice, I like to just keep it simple and logical, like 1 to 10, like, is it awesome or is it not? My husband says we should play 9 or above, but I tell him we won't have any friends left, so.
I love it. It's such a simple rule of thumb, like it just sticks. Like, is it 7 or above? If it's not, I say, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
Exactly, and that's it. Like, it's either one end of the spectrum, or it's not. And for me, I just ask myself, what do I need right now? And to be honest, because I've owned my own business for over a decade, my schedule is really flexible, and because I'm very fierce with my boundaries and my time. So from the time I wake up, which is, I don't know, between 8 and 9 a.m. to noon, I am doing only stuff for me or with my partner, because that is where I find all of, like, I can fill my cup up before I go out into the world and then have to, like, you know, stay in my center of peace while dealing with people.
I'm the same way, Brit. Of course, I worked a full-time job while I was in London, so I didn't have that much time to spend on my practice. So it was like 15 minutes of meditation in the morning and maybe in my lunch break. But now that I've gone self-employed, I'm like, from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m., I'm like in my zone doing self-love, and it feels so good. But what about people who can't dedicate so much time? Is 15 minutes enough every single day?
Yes, 100%. 1 minute of intention is worth, 100 hours of obligation, in my opinion. So I would say, if you like, and everyone has 5 minutes. If you are saying, I don't have 5 minutes, I don't even have 15 minutes, then like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Let's just start with that question. But everyone has 15 minutes. So it's about intention. And when you show up with intention, you have done enough.
Got it. Okay. So you run the Shine School, which is all about creating a self-love lifestyle, isn't it? So teaching women how to love themselves. Could you tell us a little bit more about Shine School?
Yes, absolutely. So Shine School was created basically because after working 10 years behind the chair, I was listening to women speak so negatively about themselves. And I would ask, what are you passionate about? And everyone said, I don't know. And so I began to start coaching my hair clients while I was putting their highlights in, saying, okay, we got to get your journal out and we got to do this. And I created this method over time. It really was born through me. And it was like a soul calling, because I know hair. Like, that is my expertise. Like, but with hair comes self-love and confidence. I realized those are very, very well connected. And so I started realizing that I could do whatever on the outside, but if they didn't love themselves, then it didn't matter how beautiful they looked on the outside, because they didn't see it. And so I began to start putting together a step-by-step program on how to learn to love yourself, how to let go of those limiting labels, how to learn to love your body, how to do the forgiveness work, how to attract your soul family and your tribe, because you're most likely the black sheep of the family, hello, and you need that supportive community, so that you know how to set better boundaries because you're most likely empath. So I teach you basically an entire journey of learning to love yourself. It's a spiritual 6-week self-discovery course. That's pretty much what it is. And it is for men too. I don't want to be exclusive, but there are parts like our moon cycle and diving into like the divine feminine, which I think all men need to know, because it's waking up within them. But you just don't bleed like we do. Okay. So just skip over that lesson, but it's a light worker's journey of enlightenment, basically. How do I learn to love myself? What are the questions I need to ask? What are the rituals I need to start implementing in my life? And it was a necessity. I could have gone into business, which I learned now that if you have a course selling stuff to make money, you make a lot more money. But if you have a course on teaching enlightenment or learning to love yourself, people are a lot less willing to put their self-care and their self-worth in, where their money, put their money where their mouth is. And that's been a really interesting experience for me to witness. Like, okay, if you're going to learn how to make money, you'll invest $1,000 in a course or $2,000 in B-School. Hello, I think we've all done that. But
I have.
Same, ditto. But why is it so hard for you to spend $500 on and having the exact tools for you to learn to love yourself and go after your dreams and build a lifestyle that they don't teach us in school? Our parents they're teaching us what not to do, a lot of them,
Totally, we underestimate the value of self-work. of doing personal development and learning to love ourselves, because nobody teaches us and they don't put a perceived value on it, we don't see that value, whereas it is the foundation for everything that we want to create in our lives.
Especially
Brittney, where
if you're,
can, yes.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're feeling called to share your service and your talents and your gifts with the world. If you don't believe in you, if you don't love you, and you don't have your life in order, there's no way your business is going to survive. Period.
Because then we don't have the basis. We don't have the basis for the emotion to flow through, and therefore to create anything in our business.
100%.
So, Brittney, where can people learn more about Shine School, and where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share. So you can find me at my website, BrittneyCarmichael.com, and on there you can find Shine School as well. And there are so many free resources, self-love guided meditations. There's a video challenge to help you discover who you are and to learn to remove those limiting labels so that you can start to begin that self-love healing and practice, because it is a journey. It's an everyday, every moment process. It's not like, oh, well, I'll commit like 10 minutes to self-care today. Like, you know, like this is a lifetime. This is a lifestyle.
And of course, you can also find Brit here on Instagram at The World by Brit, and you can find me as well at George Lizos. Brittney, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been so fun getting to chat about self-love, such an important topic. Thank you for helping us upgrade our spiritual, our self-love practice, which is also our spiritual practice.
100%.
And wishing you the most beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, George. I really appreciated this conversation. I think so many people are going to walk away feeling like self-love can be easy. It really can.
Yes, it is. And thank you so much to everybody for joining us live. Bye-bye.
Bye.